Welcome at number 1 Music Charts. Today we are going to watch at the New Zealand Singles Chart. Over the decades, many artists have reached the most important spot, the number 1. Many famous acts had several number 1 hits in New Zealand. Most of them were successful in a specific period of time in the history of pop music. But sometimes musicians make a comeback after a long period. Today we will look at the 10 artists who took the longest time to return to the number 1 spot. Who returned to the number 1 spot after the longest period of time? Watch this full video to find out. If you like this kind of videos, don't forget to subscribe. Number 10, Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey reached the number 1 spot in the New Zealand Singles Chart for the first time in 1990 with Vision of Love. In 1992 I'll Be There reached the top spot, and in 1994 she reached number 1 twice with Without You and Endless Love, the last song being a duet with Luther Vandross. In 1995, she managed to do that again with Fantasy and One Sweet Day, climbing to number 1. Her 7th New Zealand number 1 was Heartbreaker in 1999, a cooperation with Jay-Z. But with the start of a new century, Mariah Carey did not reach the top spot until the last week of 2018. Exactly 1,000 weeks after her last number 1 in 1999, her Christmas classic All I Want for Christmas Is You reached number 1 for the first time. Although the track was issued in 1994 and soon after became one of the most popular Christmas songs, it didn't reach the top spot until 2018. During Christmas time 2019 and 2021, the song reached number 1 as well. Number 9, Cliff Richard. In the very first year of the New Zealand Music Charts, 1960, Cliff Richard already has his first number 1 with Please Don't Tease. His next chart-topping song was I Love You in 1961, followed by The Young Ones in 1962. He kept on track in 1963, scoring one number 1 in every year when Summer Holiday got to number 1, but then Cliff took a very long holiday. Living Doll was a song that Cliff Richard already recorded in 1959, but in 1986 he recorded a new version that became very popular in a short time, especially after the song was performed in the 1986 television broadcast for comic relief. The song marked his first New Zealand number 1 in more than 23 years. Number 8, Carl Douglas. At the 8th spot we find an artist who only had 2 number 1 singles with a gap of approximately 23.5 years in between. Or even better, his second number 1 was a remake of his first. Kung Fu Fighting became a worldwide hit in the last months of 1974. It became that popular that some discotheques didn't allow the DJs anymore to play the song, because everyone on the dance floor started Kung Fu Fighting. In 1998 British dance act Bus Stop recorded a new version with the original vocals from Carl Douglas, called Kung Fu Fighting 98. This version became a New Zealand number 1 as well as the original version did. Number 7, Elton John. Elton John already reached the top in the New Zealand charts in 1973 with Crocodile Rock. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road in 1974, and Don't Go Breaking My Heart in 1976 in collaboration with Kiki D, were his other number 1 singles in the 1970s. It took 10 years to return to the number 1 position. In 1986 became Nikita his 4th New Zealand number 1. It took another decade to reach the number 1 position for the 5th time. Candle in the Wind, his tribute song to Princess Diana, who passed away in 1997, became his 5th number 1. After Candle in the Wind nobody expected Elton John to score a 6th number 1 single, but he did it in 2021. 24 years after Candle in the Wind had its last week on the top of the New Zealand Singles Chart, Cold Heart, which was a duet with Dua Lipa, reached number 1. Number 6, Cher. Cher had her first New Zealand number 1 as member of the duo Sonny and Cher with the song I Got You Babe in 1965. The duo split up in 1975, but Cher had her first solo number one already in 1973 with Half-Breed. In her long career, Cher made several comebacks, and so she did in 1998. When she issued Believe in 1998, no one would believe that it would become the biggest hit in her career. It got to number one in more than 20 countries, and so it did in New Zealand, where she finally made it to number one in the second week of 1999. Number 5. Billy Ray Cyrus. American country singer and actor Billy Ray Cyrus spent 6 weeks at the top of the New Zealand singles chart in 1992 with his song Achy Breaky Heart, for the last time on October 11, 1992, just 1 month before his daughter, the now famous singer Miley Cyrus, was born. In 2013, daughter Miley had her first New Zealand number one with We Can't Stop, but no one would expect her father to reach number one again. It finally happened in 2019 when Billy Ray Cyrus teamed up with Lil Nas X. Together they spent 12 weeks at the number one position of the New Zealand singles chart with Old Town Road. In 2023, Miley got her second number one with Flowers, but she only had to wait 9.5 years for her second number one. That's a lot shorter than her dad, who had to wait 26.5 years for his next number one. Number 4. Elvis Presley. And one of the biggest names in music history is also featured on this list. Elvis Presley reached the New Zealand number one spot 7 times in the 1960s. It's Now or Never, Are You Lonesome Tonight, Surrender, Good Luck Charm, She's Not You, In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds all reached number one. Suspicious Minds spent its last week at the top in December 1969. And as we all know, Elvis passed away in 1977. However, he didn't manage to return to the New Zealand number one spot until 25 years after his death. Dutch DJ JXL remixed the song A Little Less Conversation, and in July 2002 it got to number one in New Zealand, ending a period of more than 3 decades without an Elvis Presley song at the top spot. Number 3. Paul McCartney. Another artist who can be considered as one of the biggest in history is Paul McCartney. In the 1960s he was member of the Beatles, who had an astonishing amount of 23 number one hits in New Zealand. After the Beatles split up, Paul McCartney continued as a solo singer. Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey reached number one in 1971, and in 1974 Band on the Run seemed to be his last number one. More than 40 years later, Paul McCartney recorded some songs with Kanye West. The song For 5 Seconds, featuring the vocals of Rihanna, became a huge hit and reached the top of the New Zealand singles chart in March 2015, ending a period of more than 40 years without Paul McCartney topping the chart. Number 2. Kate Bush. British singer Kate Bush was only 19 years old when her self-written song Wuthering Heights topped the New Zealand singles chart for 5 weeks. We're talking 1978. On the 4th of June, Wuthering Heights spent its last week at the top before getting replaced by John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. In the next years she had some more hits, but none of them managed to come close to the number one position. In 1985, she issued the song Running Up That Hill, which peaked at number 26. But sometimes there's a reason why an old song becomes popular again decades later. In the case of Running Up That Hill, it was the Netflix series Stranger Things that gave the song a new boost. And 37 years after the issuing and 44 years after her first number one, Kate Bush claimed the top spot in New Zealand in June 2022. Number 1. Brenda Lee. Kate Bush broke the record in June 2022, but just half a year later she already lost it. Like Running Up That Hill, another old song got to number one decades after its first issue. Brenda Lee was a teenager when she had 2 number one singles in New Zealand. In 1960, I'm Sorry reached number one, and in 1961, Dum Dum did the same. A song she already recorded in 1958 at the age of 13, was the Christmas classic Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. It didn't get to number one, but by 2008, the song had already sold over 25 million copies around the world. In the late 2010s and early 2020s, the song returned into the charts every Christmas season. On the 2nd of January 2023, 1 week after Christmas,